With regard to fuel efficiency, in 1981, President Bush announced the National Energy Policy. And the then Vice President, and I want to read this quote because I thought it captured a lot of the spirit of the time. The Vice President said that while conservation measures were, quote, a sign of personal virtue, they are not enough to make a difference in the nation's energy needs. And unfortunately, that was the guiding principle of a lot of the early work in those days. Margot will be sensitive to the fact that the U.S. lawmakers that tried to go forward with improving the fuel efficiency of light trucks were challenged. And General Motors said if we do that, it's going to cause a catastrophe. It's going to cause us to close factories and loss of jobs and tremendous impact on the economy. And oh, by the way, GM also announced that they were coming up with a new vehicle that was going to probably exceed, at least in the laboratory, 13 miles a gallon. The Hummer, going to be out there to compete with the Ford version of the Valdez expedition vehicle. So that was the context 10 years ago. Today, this is, I think, now a world-famous slide that ICCT staff keeps producing and updating. It shows that we're making progress. We still have, obviously, a long way to go, but under the leadership of the EU and Japan, we're seeing consistent upward trend, at least in the fuel efficiency of the light-duty vehicles in most of the major countries of the world. And hopefully that's spreading, and we'll hear more about some of the other countries that are close to doing it, such as India, that will be improving the fuel efficiency. On climate, the IPCC at that time, Bob Watson was the head of the organization, and it's the first time that I recall the organization pointing the finger directly at us as playing a very critical role in climate change. And he said, quote, "We see changes in climate. We believe that humans are involved, and we're projecting future climate changes much more significant over the next 100 years than under the previous 100 years. We also had a maverick Republican that year, John McCain, joined with a Democrat to propose a cap-and-trade program in the United States Senate. We're still waiting for that bill. And we had a gentleman with great foresight out at Stanford University, Mark Jacobson, at least again to the first of my knowledge, come out and say soot was a critical component for climate change. Black carbon had to be part of the package of measures going forward. But before we get too complacent that we're making progress on reducing CO2 and climate, if we look at the transportation sector over the last 25 or 30 years, there's been a tremendous growth in fuel consumption and CO2 emissions from the sector overall. In fact, I think it still remains the fastest growing source of climate gases and climate pollutants today. The good news, perhaps, if you look real carefully at that last couple of years, we may actually be flattening out. We may actually be peaking. And hopefully when we convene at an even more beautiful spot in 2021, we'll be able to show that this curve is coming down. But it will only be doing that if we remain very vigilant in carrying out the programs we've been talking about. With regard to advanced technologies, Alan Lloyd, the president of our organization, was at that time serving in Mary's position as chair of the ARB, and in September, I believe, of that year, Alan, had to say that the action moving forward with what was then a 10-year-old ZEV mandate would continue to maintain pressure to try to move to more and more zero emission vehicles. We had at that time only the Toyota Prius as a hybrid vehicle on the world's highways, and it was joined by the Honda Insight. But we were dealing with hundreds or perhaps thousands, or worldwide, maybe 50,000 of these vehicles compared to annual sales of, in those days, probably 57 or 58 million vehicles a year. So a real drop in the bucket. In Japan, the Prime Minister took a drive that year in some of the fuel cell vehicles and announced that they were the car of the future, and he used the actual word, they were the ultimate, and he would do all he could to promote fuel cell vehicles. If we look at now 10 years later, this is from a report that Alan and Chuck Schulock are working on, coming to a fruition now, but we are starting to see some real numbers on the horizon, different projections, different forecasts, but perhaps in the 2020 timeframe, when we hold our next meeting, our next 10-year anniversary meeting, we will be seeing numbers in the millions for the first time of penetration of some of these advanced technology vehicles, critical to hopefully our long-term success in bringing down the fuel consumption. So going forward, we've clearly made a great deal of progress in terms of addressing air pollution and bringing down some of the adverse health impacts. But at the same time, it's equally clear that we have a long way to go. We are certainly not done. We still have in all of our countries, and especially in all of the major cities in our countries, having several thousands of people, especially the young and the old and the weakest amongst us, suffering adverse impacts every day. Clean fuels, we can point to places around the world today that really do have clean fuels, clean gasoline and diesel, conventional fuels. But we can equally point to many, many countries and cities that have still very dirty fuels. Fortunately, not very many with lead, but quite a few with still very high levels of sulfur. Conventional technologies are coming to, I think, conclusion. We will hear today and tomorrow from Mary and Margot going forward to this next generation Lev 3, Tier 3, which may be the culmination of as far as we can go with conventional vehicles. But if we could just get the state of the art today, if we could get every country in the world shifted to Lev 2 or Tier 2 vehicles and fuels, we could have a tremendous impact on public health and air quality. So while we continue to have the envelope pushed to the next generation, we have to make progress with the current. Fuel efficiency, it's at least now on the radar. We're now starting to move forward. But we have to say candidly, in the context of that figure showing the CO2 emissions over the last 25 or 30 years from the transportation sector, we're at a very early stage of really taking not the 5 or 10% impacts on that, but the 90% impacts that we have to do if we're going to sustain anything close to the 2 degrees C that we are trying to do. Advanced technologies critically have to play, I think, and I think most of us think, a key role in that. So we have to push the conventional technologies, but we have to get the advanced technologies with green electrons and with green hydrogen playing a more important role going forward. The next big issue, we can all guess and speculate. Certainly aviation and marine are two that are on the radar that are going to be very important, but there may be others. We're learning all the time that there are things that we don't know and things that we learn about. But I'm full of optimism going forward. Those of you that can read this, I stole it from our good friend Dr. Peterson, who presented it at your farewell, Axel, but we just need this miracle here to occur, and then we'll be able to solve the greenhouse issue as well going forward. So thank you for indulging me for a few minutes, but I thought it would be good as we start our serious work of the next couple of days to remember where we were 10 years ago and recognize that we still have a tremendous way to go, but we've made some progress, and it's been a very successful 10 years for ICCT. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Alan, for the next session. Thank you.